it was pretty intense, but at the same time, it was almost like I was coaching myself from a whole different part of myself as I was going through it and just letting it out. Crazy. It was
Crazy.
pretty interesting
Crazy amazing.
stuff. Yes, it was
Yeah.
amazing because it was in there, and you don't want it in there. You want it
Mm-mm.
out.
Yeah.
And to have the compassion to allow yourself to really be able to express that, because I buried it so deep, because perfectionists don't want to appear ugly or
Mhm.
in whatever way, emotionally or whatever, and I judged a lot of my anger for a long time.
You wouldn't be you right now,
Yeah.
angel wings, without having to have that really raw out of body, looking at it going, whoa, and
Mhm.
then just giving yourself the grace to flow.
Welcome to the Let's Be Real podcast, genuine conversations for authentic living. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Lisa Allshafer, empowerment life coach and author.
And I'm Sondra Pariser, health and wellness entrepreneur, but more importantly, truth seeker and truth speaker.
And today's episode is about breaking free from the paralysis of perfectionism.
And I think that this is something we all struggle with. I know I'm currently in the midst of it. So, Lisa, this time I appreciate you picking this particular topic at this particular time. For me, I will be vulnerable. I will open up. I will share my experience. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe and share if you feel so compelled. We really, really appreciate your feedback.
Yes, absolutely. Well, perfectionism is a bit on a spectrum. So, there's mild perfectionism and there's extreme perfectionism. I've never been an extreme perfectionist, but there are certainly people who struggle with that, where it's anxiety inducing perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not perfect, that they just, can really go into like a panic attack.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, uh, so the different levels, there's the kind that live on that end of the spectrum, and there's the other end of the spectrum that it just pops in once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a it pops in once in a while kind of person. Right, it's just certain things will trigger that aspect in myself, and that usually comes into play when I'm working on projects, when I'm doing something with my hands and creating in the creation process.
Mm-hmm.
It has certainly held me back from putting content out of all that what we're doing now is, and I've said it in the past, I'll say it again, this has been really good for me because it continues to move me out of that perfectionist
Mm-hmm.
mode and just go into more organic and not all this pre-scripted stuff that I would get kind of caught up in, and then I would just not do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think I said it in a previous podcast. I set up I don't know how many studios in them and then never ended up using any of them.
Right.
But I spent so much time, that perfectionist, on those things, well, in the lighting and this and that and the other thing, and then just ended up tearing it down. So yeah, so there's just different ways that it can come in, but it is a constricting energy, and it will, put you in a state of resistance, and it can really hurt you really in how you're living your life.
Yeah.
So why don't you
Is
share
there a
like how?
particular is there a particular thought that came up for you on what inspired this topic today? Was there something that like popped into your was it something I said or shared? Was it something you were downloaded or
Yeah.
why did
Well,
this come to you?
because we're doing the parenting by personality class,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone in the class is picking one thing that they know is holding them back in their life, and specifically in regards to parenting. And this has just always been the one that I probably contended with the most. And so I put that in that's what I'm going to focus on, because I participate as well to some degree. And then, so that's why I thought, well, why not just do it for the subject today?
Right, because
Yeah.
it's a very perfectionism doesn't mean perfectionism in this the way that you and I are well, not in the way that we mean to be talking about it. It's really more of an internal uh what we do to ourselves.
Yes.
It's what we do to ourselves. It's not,
Yes.
I'm going to make a perfect candle
Uh-huh.
or, for me right now, it's, I'm not going to eat perfectly. I've got some health challenges. We'll discuss this as we go on. Um, it's not about perfection. It's about not procrastinating because of
Right.
perfection.
Well, it's more than that. It actually does some of the things that it can show up in some of the things that you're sharing, because some people, if they're like saying trying to follow an eating plan, and if they go off, it can really throw them into then a tailspin,
Mhm.
into just really going off course. And then, because the moment they go out of the perfect meal plan, it's all over. So it's kind of an all or nothing kind of a
Donuts, pizza,
mindset.
and ice cream.
Yeah, and then you're just, again, that's a self-sabotage, and then, of course, the next day you start off with, "Okay, today's gonna
Mhm.
be a perfect day," and then, again, it can happen again and again, which is why the perfectionism, when it comes to that, that's why a lot of people don't succeed in trying to shift over their eating plan. In the
Mhm.
candles, when I was doing the candles, and I still do 'em, but just not like I was, it's hard to be a perfectionist when you're working with cement, because I was making cement candle
Mhm.
holders. Well, this is one of them right here.
Yeah.
Right? That's one of them, right? So I'm doing molds and lids and, the containers and concrete, and then
I'll
adding
make sure that's within reaching
Yeah.
context for me next time because they're beautiful. They're
Yeah.
beautiful. But yeah, you're working with elements that
So I could feel my perfectionist tendencies when I
Mhm.
was making those candles, because you're going to have natural flaws in a concrete candle container. So
Mm.
yeah, so it comes up in that way. um when I'm a crafty person, so I when I do that stuff, it shows up there, and then it can get really, like a little stress inducing. So I'm like, okay, just keep moving forward. um, editing videos, making sure the scripts are right, and that's why I didn't produce content. This is why this is so great.
Yeah, and just to make sure I don't lose my train of thought, but this is something that came out in my circle, which is something I have absolutely struggled with up until Miracle Monday, but even before that
Mhm.
is questioning why am I not far enough along, whatever that even means to you. Why am I not a just pick your whatever that is for you, and that also plays into the piece of perfectionism that we're talking about is making statements for me, I'll just speak strictly for myself.
Mhm.
In all the work in all my life and everything that I was doing, how was it that on November 1st of 2022 I sat there in my living room with a declaration to universe of or a dissertation declaration.
Mhm.
And I was so unhappy. And the thing that got me the most is this exact topic, which is
Mhm.
why am I not further enough along? How am I still here? What? So just to kind of, as we start to give you some examples of how that shows up for
Mhm.
people, it shows up for everybody.
Yeah.
So, just to kind of stay like, what is it for you? Let's see if we can dig in and find out.
Yeah. Well, we talked about that. I think it was back when you were going through that experience. And part of it is we don't have the full picture of exactly how much we're clearing out, how much we're healing. So, and this is kind of one of the signs of, perfectionism, is unrealistic expectations. We might not realize they're unrealistic, but that's part of having the awareness around us. So we might set these unrealistic expectations. So when it comes to the human experience, and where you have done all this work and I have done all this work, and I still have perfectionist stuff. It just doesn't bother me that I still
Mm-hmm.
have it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like I catch it and correct it, which I've said, which is kind of the mantra there: catch and correct, because you could be clearing hundreds of lifetimes. So
Yep.
20 years in relation to hundreds of lifetimes, that's pretty
Mm-hmm.
fast.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? And so then the more, and this is, I mean, I used to feel that way. Why am I not further along? Why am I not,
Mm.
it was earlier in the time I let that go, because I'm like, I went through the same process. I was just able to let that go. Um, but it took me a while to let it go. And so you're kind of in that place,
Mm-hmm.
like you've been doing this for half your life about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, that need to be further along is a form of
Mm-hmm.
resistance. The need to be
Mm-hmm.
further along is continuing to resist the feeling of not far enough along. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's how you continue to feel, because it strengthens that feeling, because
Yep.
you're resisting it.
Yep.
So now it's uh, relaxing into and surrendering into you're exactly where you need to be. And
Mhm.
you're probably further along than you realize, but it's hard to
Mhm.
really connect into that when you're feeling like you're not far enough along.
Mhm. Mhm. Which plays into the next point, which is the anxiety of and stress that comes along with really, for me, it's the resistance. The more I beat myself up,
Mhm.
the more resistant I become, the more anxious and the more stress I have. And through this whole process, and I don't want to say that that part of it ended on Miracle Monday, but wow, it was really hard in my skin. The anxiety was like, I mean, you and I've talked about it every single time we jumped on a phone call. It was like I'm having literal heart palpitations and
Yeah.
anxiety. And um anyway, that's an absolute side effect to all of this.
Yeah. And so that anxiety and that stress kicks you into the next point, which is being overly critical and hard on yourself.
It's all playing in the same damn circle.
It does.
It
So
really does, yeah.
it's really being able to look at it objectively and say, I'm in my loop, I'm in my pattern of perfectionism or whatever
Mhm.
you want to call it, but you're in that loop. And it's being able to recognize that you're in a repetitive pattern, but also the emotions that are coming up within that pattern. And then what is this pattern here to teach you? What
Mm.
emotions are you feeling? What resistance do you have inside this pattern? And what is this pattern here to teach you? Because that's why they keep looping around, is because we're still
Mhm.
not understanding or getting or mastering the lesson that's encoded in that pattern.
Yep.
And so I would say part of that lesson would be to trust that you're where you are where you need to be, and that there's more to this than meets the eye. Because as human
Mhm.
beings, we just are, we mentioned it last time, I think we're just heavily veiled here. And
Yep.
even though we're making great strides, in our own evolutionary process and awakening up to who we really are and connecting into spirit and all those wonderful
Mhm.
things, but we're still a human being. So it reminds me of someone who said to me that I was working with, I thought I was done with my anger. It's
That
like, that's not quite how it works. It's anger is a human emotion. It's knowing what to do with the anger or the stress or the anxiety or the criticism or whatever it is. It's knowing what to do with that when it shows up. You're going to feel, I still get angry. It's just I don't get angry very often, but I still get angry or
Mhm.
frustrated or irritated or whatever the case might be. And I still have these, some of these things because I'm still human.
Mhm.
And it's just the stretch between periods of kind of those kinds of emotions gets much wider and wider and wider. They don't happen nearly as often and they're not as intense as
Mm.
they have been in the past.
Yep.
So, but trying to strive for not having anger is trying to strive for perfection.
Yeah. And there you have it. Truly, there you have it. I mean, there's my ding ding, right? Because there's that circle.
Yeah.
And in trusting that you're exactly where you're supposed to be is really an opportunity for you, for anybody, to get curious. Lisa, how many times did you say that to me, to Alan, to us as we were going through this
Mhm.
process? Why don't you try to really look at it? Take a look at it. Sit with it. Understand that if you feel it, it is yours. And the and then really radical self-responsibility in it. Um, but the best way to understand it is to walk through it and to feel it.
Mhm.
And again, it's all this vicious circle. I don't even want to say it's a vicious circle. If you find yourself in a circle,
Mhm.
and I mean, that was the epitome of, I can't remember what month it was, whether it was January or February. And I just wanted to throw in the towel and say, screw it. And I just want to
Mhm.
leave and I want to run. And I don't care. And my marriage isn't worth it. And you were so awesome in reminding me that I can fix it here. I can fix it somewhere else. Either way, it's mine to fix. And it will circle back.
Yeah.
100%. It will circle back because it's mine and only I can fix it.
Yeah, oftentimes that's what people do is they get out of one relationship, putting all the responsibility in how the other person shows up. And not that you were doing that, but that's what a lot of people do.
I was
Um,
doing I was doing I was doing my fair share of that for sure.
okay, okay. And so then they end up getting into a new relationship that they're dealing with the same
Mhm.
thing,
Mhm.
and you're still stuck with your stuff. And that doesn't mean that everyone who is in a relationship should stay in that relationship for forever. It just means work on yourself if you're having relationship issues, but you truly do feel that the relationship is worth the work that it takes to make it work, but then quit putting all of it on the other person, bring it back and start
Yeah.
working on yourself. And if you have a partner who's willing to do the same thing, that's where now you can truly heal the relationship, which is exactly what you have. You have Alan, who has definitely, done a
Mm.
lot of self work, and that has helped, him just as an
Yeah.
individual, but helped your relationship as well. But it's hard when one person is and one person isn't, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
Yep.
But it is, and if someone's being abused and that kind of stuff, that's a
Yeah,
different scenario,
yep.
right? That's not stay and keep getting abused. That's not what we're saying either. It's just recognizing that the more you work on yourself, what's so interesting about that is you start to see changes in the other person, which
Yep.
is phenomenal
Mhm.
because you're showing up differently. They actually are not even on a conscious level oftentimes, but they're
Mhm.
shifting to the new energy that you're bringing into the relationship, and you're getting a better result from that person, whatever it is that you're looking for from them, whether it's love or
Mhm.
acceptance or attention or a feeling of importance or whatever it might be, because you're letting go of the needy energies that you have in that person, and you're starting to work on whatever the emotions are underneath that needy energy so that you're clearing it so you're not needy anymore for it, whether it's needing any of those things I just listed, or needing control, or needing to make the other person wrong, or
Mhm.
whatever it could be. There's so many things that come in the form of resistance that sabotage our relationships.
And I'm going to definitely piggyback off of know your relationship that you're in, because there are certain relationships you got to go. You just it whatever abusive means to another person. But I'm talking physical abuse, it could be emotional abuse, it could be drug addiction, it could be a whole litany of things. Um, in my particular scenario, and this is something over this weekend that I was sharing with you yesterday. Um, I have just really done a lot of work, and I over the weekend in a random retreat with beautiful, beautiful sisters, I got to sit in a ceremonial circle um, from Friday evening until Sunday around noon. And it was an experience I've never had before. And I had no idea what to expect. I had just, my little soul self, higher self said, "Here you go," and just go. And there were so many things about the experience. It was very, very last minute. It was one of those weekends that just was quiet. It was a quiet work weekend. It was just a quiet weekend. And Alan, usually when I go be me, um, it it makes him very nervous just because our personalities are so polar opposite. And I just fly by the seat of my pants, and he's like, "You're going to go somewhere where you don't know anybody." It was kind of like my trip with Corey, my girlfriend, um, when I first met her, and he's like, "You don't even know her." I'm like, "No, yeah, I totally know her. I just haven't actually met her in person yet." So here was another a situation like that, but all the work that Alan and I have done has been me raising my consciousness, me
Your
healing
awareness,
my
yeah. Mhm.
awareness, understanding my part in it, and
Yeah,
then finally both of us doing enough healing
yeah,
to end the conflict, Lisa. That I don't know when that ended, but September, the weekend of September 23rd. That was the weekend that conflict. That's an interesting thing to play into perfectionism, right?
yeah.
Because the conflict, at least in our relationship, was more because, and you can give a little bit better color, we weren't hearing each other. We weren't actively listening to what the other person was saying. And so that inherently just conflict, 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 to the point where for me, I'd just walk away. I'm like, I'm not doing this. But then after that weekend, I could see awareness. I could see he's going into conflict and I have a choice. I can either, he's trying to say something, right? He's trying to communicate and it looks a lot like conflict, but I am not going to do conflict. So what am I going to do with this? And the more I was able to just release my feelings about how he was feeling, the more I could hear him. Wait, he has to talk about something
Mhm.
and he's upset about something, and his emotions are not about anything about me. And so really we just have a really very peaceful,
Yeah.
very peaceful relationship right now. And it'll never go back to being any other way than this way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this weekend, the best part of the whole weekend
Mhm.
was him.
Awesome. Well, that's great. And also, you didn't have unrealistic expectations for the weekend either, because you didn't
Thank
have
God.
because you didn't have expectations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were able to actually just move in and experience it without the expectations, and then have
Mhm.
a really great experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
wonder if I go into, and I know I will go into a ceremonial circle. There's a lot of power in that. And there's a lot of healing. And the focus was really, with all the conflict and stuff going on outside of us,
Mhm.
to get into a group of women and have some deep devotional prayers for love and for humanity and for peace and for this beautiful planet that has just been harmed. But anyway, it was,
Yeah.
I'll do it again.
Yeah.
I will try to not have any expectations.
Well, that's just something that it's a catch and correct thing. If you find yourself putting all these expectations on another person, on an experience, on yourself, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
so there it is. So let me correct that. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say also that when it comes to relationships, if the perfectionist tendencies are in the relationship, a lot of times when there's conflict in the relationship, what can happen is the person who holds more of the perfectionism stuff is taking things personally. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason they're taking things personally because what lives underneath perfectionism is not enough. So when criticism kind of comes out, and maybe it's not even really criticism, maybe it's just kind of talking in a conversation, between, someone and their spouse or someone and their child or whatever. But if somebody has more of the perfectionist tendencies, they're already looking for, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong inside? And so everything the filter is whatever they're telling me is coming through as I'm doing something wrong because I'm not enough. And that could be furthest thing from the intention behind the words being
Mm-hmm.
said. But for that perfectionist tendency, it's that kind of that, oh, I'm not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And they're telling me I'm not enough, and that's how they're hearing it, even though that might not be what's being said. So then that's where the feedback can be difficult, because if someone's holding that kind of energy and they're not recognizing it, and it's just happening on an automatic kind of basis, then it's hard to give feedback, which then can create more conflict that can lead, again, then you get caught in a whole nother pattern in that way. So yeah. Um, Again, it shows up in a lot more areas than we realize. It's not just about doing everything perfectly.
Right.
It's an energy within us that is expressed through some of those things. So sometimes what people do is they procrastinate because, it's not going to be good enough. So they just avoid it, because having that as part of my, past experiences, it's like, well, if I'm going to do this, I have to go all out and do it exactly right. So, that feels so heavy. It feels so hard. And so then you end up procrastinating. Um, and then in other ways, it's just taking too much time and effort on whatever it is that you're working on, if it's like more of a project oriented thing, or you know whatever the case might be, because you're putting so much time and effort in something, it just feels overwhelming, so then you
Mhm.
go back into procrastination.
Mhm. And there's that circle.
And there's that circle. And then ultimately, the fear of failure, making mistakes, feeling embarrassed, that it's not good enough, all these things, which mostly is just in the head. It's not really the reality of what's happening outside of us. So, just recognizing these things, and just realizing that, how you're seeing it is probably so distorted from how other people are seeing whatever it is you're working on, or yourself. There's just a distortion there because the perfectionist, energy creates distortions.
That's really funny. That's so true. We all see the world through the lens of who we are.
Yeah.
And, and our challenge as human beings is to take some of these tools that we're sharing and, little by little, little by little, set
Mhm.
smaller expectations and really it's awareness. Your awareness, consciousness, awareness, really understanding, oh, so that's what conflict is. Even when you and I first started working together, this most recent time, you, me, and Alan, you, Alan, and I, me, and Alan. And anyway, English. It was we. I don't know that I really understood conflict, like how much conflict was in the relationship, and even what that was,
Yeah.
until almost the healing part. Once I really got to healing my own personal childhood wounds, um little by little. And I think Miracle Monday is when I finally started to understand, oh, this is what she's talking about conflict. oh
Mhm.
oh and then my participation in it,
Yeah.
and then you go, well, this person standing, and it doesn't have to be a spouse. It could be your children, it could be your parent, it could be any relationship
Yeah.
that is one of those relationships that you are sensitive to. Typically, when you agree, it would be either your parents, your children, your spouse, or significant others, or even your siblings.
Yeah.
Is where some of these old patterns really cement themselves.
Right.
So those are the relationships to really kind of look. If you're not in a relationship, like we use me as an example because I'm married and I have two little kids.
Mhm.
Um, but the truth is, I mean, look at all the healing that you've done because of Eric.
Mhm.
So I would encourage, anybody to look at, if you're really curious about, well, what is it about me that I can start to get curious about, meaning bringing into your awareness some of these little pieces, is to pick the person who's closest to you
Mhm.
and really start to look at, how do you communicate? How does it feel? Do you feel safe? Do you feel loved? That's a pretty healthy relationship,
Yeah.
right? And then get even more curious about that. So if I have this here, how do I duplicate this over here, over here, over here? Or if you don't have that, then you could take some of these, just start to pay attention. Okay, man, I can't even pick an analogy other than, I'm going to use Alan because the conflict, because that was a thing for me that took
Mhm.
me, you bang my head against the wall for years to understand conflict. Um, but yeah, it would present in what would look like a fight or an argument, or, he's trying to make me wrong and I'm trying to get him to see my side and he wants me to see his side. And it was this whole, he's not listening. And that is conflict. It doesn't necessarily mean to need to be a fight.
Mhm.
It can just be, you're missing the mark. You're
Yeah.
not hearing each other.
Yeah. And you can be walking around not talking to each other. That's conflict too. It's
Oh,
just,
that's totally conflict.
yeah, it's internal, it's internal because you're both walking around, giving each other the silent treatment.
Yeah. Yeah. See, so these are things that, everybody's in a relationship with somebody.
Mhm.
So, because we're humans and that's what we do.
Right.
So, to really, really be able to, just play around with it until next week when we see y'all on a podcast. Here's our suggestion. If you
Yeah.
don't know what we're talking about,
Right.
just go and watch.
Mhm.
How do you feel? How does that present? What does that look like?
Mhm.
Really loud or silent? Ooh.
Yeah.
It's those silent times, I will honestly say, with Alan that are far more emotion provoking for me
Yeah.
because I'm like, what's wrong? Like,
It's it's it is actually when it's used to a greater degree, it's a form of, emotional abuse, because what you're doing is you're withdrawing love from the other person, and you're saying you're not worthy of my love right now.
yeah.
So that's why a lot of times I did a video on the silent treatment, and because I've received it. I used to give it, but I've also received it pretty harshly. And I tell you, it's no picnic. It can really rip you apart inside because the other
Mhm.
person will not engage with you. And I didn't have it harshly like that. I was actually wanting them to engage with me. I just didn't know
Mm.
how to do it because I was stuck in my own stuff. This is, a long time ago, but um thank God, because it's painful on both sides really, but the
Mhm.
person who's receiving it, it's like, because you don't know, sometimes you don't even know why they're mad at you. you
That's
know
what I'm saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so then you're walking around in confusion and pain and all these things. So, and then if you have the perfectionist tendency and you're the receiver of that, you're going through the litany of things of you think you've done
Mm.
wrong, and don't have kind of maybe the understanding that this is their way of going about this, which is not a healthy way. It's called, even in the four horsemen of that can predict a relationship going south. Stonewalling, that's what that is.
Mm.
Stonewalling is one of those things that is
Oh, yeah.
a strong predictor of divorce. So is defensiveness, which will come up a lot in conflict, right? Defensiveness.
Mhm.
Criticism is also, I can't remember the fourth one off the top of my head, but yeah. So uh,
And I don't know. I'm feeling compelled to even say this right now.
mhm,
When we're talking about relationships that just need to be worked on, and there's ultimately love underneath.
mhm,
And one of the questions that you asked both of us out of the gate is it your intention to hurt the other person?
right.
And both of us were like, oh my heavens, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And that was a very, very powerful question. So, although I will tell you, it felt like he was doing it intentionally.
Mhm.
And so, you even asking that question to both of us, and both, like, you saw both of our responses, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And what a powerful, powerful, powerful question.
Mhm.
Now, that leads into relationships where I'm not going to throw this word around lightly. I'm going to throw it around in its absolute definition, which, if you're in a relationship with a narcissist and they are roaming the planet,
Yeah.
Lisa, how would you, because this is something you and I both experienced, not in a relationship necessarily for me, meaning an intimate relationship, but certainly with what I call my ex-wife, because it's my husband's ex-wife, but
Mhm.
is a genuine absence of emotion.
It's not an absence of emotion.
Well, it's not
That's
a
not
sociopath.
possible.
It's not a sociopath. It's just
Right.
that they don't really,
They're not, they lack empathy. They can lack
in
empathy,
into an extreme degree.
and yes,
Yeah.
and so I don't really want to go into a whole narcissist sidebar with a perfectionism as the subject, because
That'll be a whole
that's a
other,
really big subject to kind of
yeah, that's a
tackle.
whole other YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, so but yeah, so let's maybe make that into a podcast
Yeah.
because it really is a big subject to kind of move into, and it's moving away from perfectionism. So let's getting back onto perfectionism. If you think about how, if you struggle with perfectionism, it's how can you break through out of that perfection, those perfectionist
Mhm.
tendencies. And one way is to set realistic expectations, because we've already talked about the expectations
Mhm.
being unrealistic. So
Mhm.
set realistic expectations. So one of the ways that I have done that for my life is not striving for perfection, but striving for quality relationships, quality in the
Mhm.
projects that I do, quality in, whatever it is that emanates from me. Because I know I hit quality very quickly, because my perfectionism has
Mhm.
been, which for most perfectionists, what what someone could consider, what a perfectionist would consider getting by, would look perfect for a lot of people. It's just already in there. You just need to recognize that when you start to feel, you can create quality maybe in the first hour of whatever it is you're doing. For instance, if it's a project oriented, and after that, you're probably now moving into the perfectionist tendencies, tweaking every little word or
Mhm.
tweaking every little thing that you're working on. I mean, some people take forever to just carve out a email, because they have to make sure all the wording is absolutely correct. And some people are just like,
Mhm.
there's errors all over it, and it's all confusing, and they just send it anyway because it's just not part of their makeup.
Well, and I think watching you and knowing you,
Hmm.
and you're very type A, and we've discussed this.
Hmm.
Watching you lean into your lifestyle change as far as your diet goes was, I, as like one of your soul sisters,
Hmm.
watching you do that was like, whoa, you didn't just go 100, I'm going 100% all in.
Hmm.
You just, all right, so I'm having my last cup of coffee. And it was like 3 weeks in, like,
Hmm.
because I can't have cream. Like, and it was just watching you give yourself that grace.
Hmm.
This is where I want to end up. And it's just going to take time, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And now look at you now with just, again, kind of releasing all of that. I have to do it perfectly right out of the gate, all or none. That's it. I'm eating donuts again, pizza. And you gave yourself all the grace and the time. And and now it's a life, no chocolate. Or now
Hmm.
if you eat chocolate, it doesn't get you,
Right. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you set very realistic expectations with a bigger intention of overall health.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I know the constriction of the perfectionist tendencies, which definitely brings in the inner critic pretty
Mm.
harshly. And so that, I mean, that has just changed immensely over the years. I was so tight and hard with myself for the
Mhm.
majority of my life. So I really started digging in deep when I was 40. So that's 19 years ago, even though I did kind of stuff before
Mhm.
that. But that's when I really got serious and really started to make my way down into that subconscious stuff and all that. But I had a very harsh inner critic, and
Mm.
it's just like you're in your self-imposed prison with that stuff.
Yeah.
It's not,
Yeah.
again, it's no picnic either.
Mhm.
And so therefore it was kind of breaking out of that
Mm.
self-imposed prison and learning how to have compassion for myself, and um the inner child work that we have done and that I do with
Mhm.
others as well, helped that tremendously, because it gives you more compassion for yourself, because you have this inner child that lives within you. And the harshness I was doing with myself, she was the recipient of as well.
Mhm.
And when
Mhm.
you think about it that way, it's like, well, I don't want to,
Ow.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So it almost puts like another being in there with you, which another being is kind of in there with you,
Mhm.
energetically for sure, spiritually, and even on a psychological level. So that helped greatly also to bring more of that self compassion in for myself. But man, there was some, that's pretty gnarly stuff that I had to work through, because was rooted in anger, but anger at myself.
Yep.
I mean, even self hatred. I had some self hatred going on.
Mm.
And I can recall some experiences where some of that was coming up even after I had been doing years of work, and I'm like, holy shit. This is so intense.
Oh my gosh, Lisa, you just swore.
Yeah, right? And, it's not like I never swear, but anyway, I just
I'm
don't swear a lot.
just kidding. I feel like that's usually my warehouse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
So
that's how intense. No, no, no.
yeah,
This is how intense it was.
and so when it was happening, this is what was actually pretty cool about it. I knew what was happening. I knew this
Mm,
old self-hatred energy was coming up for me. And even though it was so intense, I couldn't really like stop it. And I didn't want to really try to stop it because that's not going to really be effective. So I just let it run its course while still maintaining an observer, um, being the observer of it as well. Which is, again, if you've ever had this experience, when you're such intense emotion, and then you're able to observe yourself having the intense emotion, that's just kind of another level, right, of skill
mhm,
set, but it's very powerful. So I knew that I was clearing old energy and it just needed to get out. I mean, like
mm,
rage and looking in
mhm,
the mirror and saying, I hate you, I hate you. And it's like it was so out of the norm for me, to do that. But I'm like, okay, let's let this puppy out of the house, and I did. And that was the last time it happened, and it's never happened since, but it was pretty intense. But at the same time, it was almost like I was coaching myself from a whole different part of myself as I was going through it and just letting it out. Crazy. It was, yeah, it was
crazy.
pretty interesting
Crazy amazing.
stuff. Yes, it was
Yeah.
amazing because it was in there, and you don't want it in there. You want it
Mm-mm.
out.
Yeah.
And to have the compassion to allow yourself to really be able to express that, because I buried it so deep, because perfectionists don't want to appear ugly, or
Mhm.
in whatever way, emotionally or whatever,
Right.
and I judged a lot of my anger for a long time. Hmm.
Yeah, it's neat to hear you suffer. No, it's it's like it didn't come out that way. It's just like how I view, like,
That, yeah,
no, you're a human being, right? And
yeah,
you
yeah, well,
you
sure.
you wouldn't be you right now, angel wings, without having to have that really raw out of body, looking at it going, whoa, and
Yeah.
then just giving yourself the grace to flow.
Hmm. Yeah,
It's
it's
awesome.
really, really powerful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So another point in helping people to break out is to focus on progress, not perfection,
Oh,
right?
that's
I mean, that's
yeah.
a common thing, right? That
Yeah.
people say, progress, not
Yeah.
perfection.
Yeah. In l- little steps, not okay, I'm going to go right all in over here on whatever, just the progress. And even I always bring it back to smoking because it was just such a demon in my life that was a true monkey on my back.
Mhm.
Really, like the amount of beating myself up I did over that, and the secrecy about it, and ugh, all of it, and I just got to this point, and you played a, a really powerful piece in all of this. You and Jason were, okay, no judgment,
Yeah.
no judgment, stop judging it, like,
Hmm.
don't be in the closet. Stop judging, stop judging, stop judging. And it really came down to that was it. So I just stopped judging it. I let it be, and I trusted the healing journey. Um and then it gave me grace, and it gave me time, and it gave me space. And so I knew I was progressing ultimately towards never smoking again. I knew that. I just didn't question it anymore. I didn't judge it anymore. I knew it was a timing thing. And it did it finally. I was just progressing along little by little, healing my wounds, doing the inner child work. And I can't stress this enough. There is now so much information out there on how important it is to really go in and just get in touch with what your inner child looks like, what they're saying, and listen. It's so much easier to do today than however long ago, Lisa, than when I was this big black blob. I don't even know how long ago that was. Just wasn't as much information on simple tips and tools that you can use to really tap in And maybe that's a progress point for anybody that really wants to go there is
Mhm.
go online, find a book, watch a podcast.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's
Well,
all
even
there.
Brene Brown has some good stuff about perfection because
Oh
again, it's
yeah.
also connected into, embarrassment, shame. I mean, these things are all kind of connected, not enough, all that.
Yep.
And so she has the gifts of imperfection, which is I mean, it's old now, but it's, it's out there on books, whatever, Audible.
Yep.
And that's a good place to start if you
Yeah.
haven't really dove into the world of, looking for resources for that specific tendency of perfectionism. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And there's your progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
then like I said, even, about my experience and how I had more self-compassion for myself over the years. That's really important, is to find that compassion for yourself in
Hmm.
that. Of course, as you practice compassion with others, it helps to
Do it for
foster
yourself.
self-compassion as well,
Yeah.
because it's just compassion, and it can go both ways. The more you practice it, the easier it is to go both ways. But self-compassion, I think, is really important piece of healing from perfectionism, which is why the inner child work is really helpful in that category.
Right.
Yeah.
Would that fall into take imperfect action?
Well, that would be definitely, which is different than, it's a little different than progress, not perfection, because what holds us up is, we don't want our action to be imperfect. So one of the things that I've just recently taken is a course around gamifying, online programs, because so
Mhm.
much, so the rate of people completing online programs is like 3% or some crazy low amount, which is like, wow, this is,
Really?
not good. So I've now moved into gamifying any programs that I do going forward. I'll end up gamifying my one I already created years ago, but right now I'm
What does that
working on
wait,
that.
what does that mean to gamify? I'm not.
Like in the parenting by personality course, you get these
Mhm.
points, and then you get the
Oh
points,
yeah.
and then they make the little noises, and then you get little things come up,
Yeah.
and then you have, like, giveaways, things like that. But there's just different ways to gamify it, but it hits the dopamine. You get the dopamine hits when you click a button and you get, oh, done, complete. You get a little celebration kind of a thing, right? So
Recognition.
recognition,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep.
And of course, the perfectionists are going to want to make sure everything's checked. Right? So they'll be like, oh, I can't have an empty check mark. Got to get that checked. So, yeah.
Oh, I
So,
know. It's burning on the back of my mind, and I'm not really one for perfection.
yeah.
Um, but it is now I totally get it. How funny, because I'm like, oh, I actually have bullet points that I have to accomplish before we have our next course.
Hmm. Yes.
And I like that because I'm like, I have a tendency, like if I don't have structure,
Hmm.
that gives me, you gamified me, you structured me, which I love structure.
Yeah.
Um, oh, that's really cool.
Plus, it's fun. It's
It's fun.
fun, which is going
Yeah,
to appeal to your color code personality, right?
exactly.
But what I'm also getting from that course, which I've heard many years, but now I'm actually implementing, um, is take imperfect action means, move forward even if you don't have everything, like, what it means to me is that you don't have everything pre-planned out. Now obviously I have the course, I have a structure and all that, but for me to do it where I don't have every little detail already pre-recorded and put out there, is helping me to just take imperfect action, so everything is live. I'm not doing the scripts like I did, before in my other course, as far as I needed everything to be absolutely right. And the need to be prepared is my Achilles heel.
Mm,
That's where my stress comes in, which is connected to perfectionism, the need to be prepared perfectly.
mhm.
So, aga I've been doing this, what, 20 years or plus, and I still work with it. And I'm continuing to move out of my comfort zone when it comes to this particular subject of perfectionism. And so, even that course that we're doing currently is also, I'm gaining such benefit from it as well, because I don't have it all pre-recorded and set out there and all that. We're doing it kind of like we're doing the podcast. We're
Yeah.
going into the live sessions, and I get to go through the little bit of stresses that I go through. Not nearly what they would have been years ago, but a little bit of stress on all that stuff and trying to get through it in a timely manner. That stresses me out. That stresses me out probably the most, but that's okay. I'm willing to dive into the outside of my comfort zone. So
That's where we grow.
that's right.
That's where we
Yeah.
grow. I have nothing to say about all of that except for yes, 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 and
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, you
And this,
get to witness it too.
yeah, well, in I gotta all you and I really care about is helping people. I mean, at the core of all of it, you and me separately of each other, in
Yep.
because we're all on this individual journey inside the human experience, and it's the understanding. It's who one of the coolest things I got to do over the weekend. The coolest parts of all of it is in deep meditation. The coolest part of the whole thing was when my eyes were shut.
Mm.
To see inside myself was like, whoa. Like, I'm now in a place where I've gotten to through working with you, and but in working with Jason, working with Alan. I mean, working with my children, all of it, that I know I'm never alone. We've talked about that conversation I had with Stacy Mia when she was really, actually she was integrating. She was integrating, and we had this conversation um, on the way home from school about being alone. She's just, I'm all alone and I have no friends and la 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 la. And me even having with her, I don't even remember what I said, but I got to this place where I'm like, oh no, you're not alone. You might feel like you are. We all feel like we're alone until we get to this place where we know for sure we're not. And
Mhm.
that's when you're connected in. And that's when you're connected to God. You're connected to your higher self, your spirit, your soul, your guides, and you realize, oh shit, the world's so much bigger than this.
Yeah.
And that we're the furthest thing from being alone. And that's what you and I really want to give people. But I got to give it to, and this is where you look at children and you go, especially children right now. So she was just turned 11 at the time that we had that conversation. From that moment forward, she's off to the races, and she's goofy and she's quirky and she is beautiful. And to see her in all of that. So anyway, what you and I want to give to people is the healing journey
Yeah.
will get you to the other side, where whether you're battling with perfectionism or any of these other ego centered, um, soul, spirit separating
Mhm.
emotions, to identify them, to stand outside of them like you did, to
Mhm.
look at it and go in, just go in. And there's tools everywhere. And maybe this podcast is one of them, for we hope. That's
Yeah.
our that's our hope. That's why we're
Yeah.
doing it. Imperfect and all.
Yes. Because perfection doesn't exist other than the perfection of imperfection.
Right.
Right?
R-
Everything's always in a state of change, even
Yeah.
nature. Everything's,
Mhm.
nothing stays constant, right? Do you really ever find a whole lot of perfection in nature? No, you've got trees that have holes in their leaves and whatever. I mean, it's just all part of life, and certainly part of this existence in all ways, on at least on this planet. I don't know if there's a perfect planet out there, but that doesn't matter at this point for us because we're on this planet, right?
That's right.
So, but I see sometimes, it's especially in more of the, I guess you would say, the spiritual community, some of the teachings and the beliefs that are out there, which is part of what I did, is really recognizing what are the beliefs that are driving some of this perfectionism. And one of the teachings that I uh no longer really no longer fits in my belief system, my
Mhm.
my paradigm, if you will, And because it ended up being another form of perfectionism from my perspective. And
Mhm.
that's completely dissolving the ego. I think if you completely dissolve your ego, you probably don't need to be here anymore because the ego is part of the human
Yeah.
existence.
Yeah.
So that's one I let go of
Mm.
because that felt like another state, of perfection. Um, t- uh, completely, completely embracing my feminine energy,
Mm.
my feminine essence. That ended up being another route down perfectionist lane. I have a strong masculine side as well. I've just balanced it out a lot more, and so they now are much more synergized, which is
Mhm.
why I think I've always attracted in both men and women, both to my coaching practice and to the workshops that I do, because I think I have enough of each of those energies to be attracting in both.
I would agree. I mean, just in what you've done with the most masculine man I know, which happens to be my husband. So
Yeah.
in how he resonates with you, you resonate with him.
Mhm.
You can speak his language, and
Yeah.
you can meet him energy for energy, and yeah, okay, I'm sorry, keep
Yeah.
going. Okay,
Yeah.
go back to your feminine.
Yeah, so but I definitely needed to bring in more of my feminine energy. That
Yeah.
was I didn't have enough of it, that I was tapped into. So definitely it needed to be balanced out. Now it's like definitely the feminine runs, I lead with my feminine, but I still have a lot of masculine qualities that
Hmm.
serve me well. And if
Yep.
they don't serve me well, then I catch them and correct them, so that's just
Hmm.
kind of how that goes. The other one was the full actualization of your higher self in physical form. Um,
Is that
yeah,
possible?
that's kind of the other one that,
That's the
man,
other one that you're
I
not on
ran
this
on that
planet
one.
anymore.
I ran on that one for so many years, and again, I just recognized, wow, that's another form of perfectionism. And
Mm.
have people done it? Okay, you could say maybe Jesus did it, right?
Mhm.
Okay, well, that's so I guess you could say
That's
it
a mighty
can
tall order.
can be done, but is that really, again, anything's possible, but if you start making that your goal, that's an unrealistic expectation,
Yeah.
at least in my view. Can it be done? I'll say, okay, yeah, it can be done. But how many people on the planet can actually attain that state? I mean, I don't even know if it's a 1% of 1% of one, I mean, it's just such
Yeah.
a small area. If somebody feels that that's what their mission is here on this planet, then okay, but that's certainly not the mission of the many.
Yeah.
And as we talked about our soul objectives, last in our last podcast, that's not a
Mhm.
soul objective, at least for
Mm-mm.
the many.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's not for some. Okay, that's cool. Whatever floats your boat. But for perfectionists, that you can get trapped in that, and then
Mm.
it will never feel like you're further enough along. It'll
Mm.
never feel like you're good enough, or you're even worthy enough, or whatever the case might be. And so it can be really an entrapment for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Not that I haven't dealt with that. Oh yeah, I already just called it out
yeah,
earlier.
yeah,
Yes, yeah. Why am I here? Why
yeah,
am I still doing this after blah, blah,
yeah.
blah? Okay, well, the reality is you got some more healing to do. And you
Hmm.
know what? That's okay. That's
Hmm.
okay.
You
We're
may have
yeah.
healing to do for the remainder of your life. It's
Yes.
just your life is, because of all the healing that, you have done along the way, your life is so much better than it used to be,
Mhm.
right? Doesn't mean you don't have
Well,
challenges or that old stuff isn't going to sneak up periodically, like what I talked about earlier. It's just now you know what's happening. A deeper
yes.
layer is coming
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. And even one of the things that I guess if you went back to why am I still having to deal with all this? Um really the more I work and the more I allow forgiveness for, you know, whatever, whether it's forgiveness, acceptance, or okay, I'm not where I wanted to be or where I'm going, and I don't have any more of that.
Hmm.
And now I just go, okay, well today's a miracle. Let's go create some miracles, and then just doing that without attachment to the outcome, it is every day is just so uh purposeful, and
Mm.
it's not every day is great. And in trauma now today for me, like, or things that are popping up, it just needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
It needs to be addressed. It needs to be acknowledged. You need to, I mean, right now, like, there's nothing really wrong with me health wise, but I need to really stop something before it starts,
Mhm.
because I'm acknowledging that, you know what? There are things about my health, like chronic shingles,
Mhm.
allergies. Um, I'm now in a different place where it's like, wait a second, that's not how the body's supposed to function.
Right.
Okay, well, now I know that.
Yeah.
And now I don't think I was ever paid attention to it. It's like I've had shingles since my early 20s.
Mhm.
But wait, that's not okay. I mean, that's not how the body is in a state of balance, is to be constantly fighting something in your body.
Mhm.
Okay. So there's more work to be done. All
Yeah.
right. Well, what are we gonna do? We got to know
Yeah.
what we're working with, and
You're
then
yeah, and you're evolving. Evolving doesn't have an end point,
right,
which can
right,
be a perfection point for people.
right.
You're always in a state of change, but what you're doing is you're always changing for the better.
Mm-hmm,
Even if you've still got stuff you're dealing with, it's still better than it used to be.
mm-hmm,
Even
mm-hmm,
if it's something that shows up in the body that maybe is like getting more intense, it's like, yes, but now I have the capacity and the understanding and the awareness to now deal with this that I wouldn't have had 5 or 10 years ago.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And think about this, just you even saying that. So the nerve pain on my sacrum, I hope everybody knows what your sacrum is, right? It's your tailbone bone,
Mhm.
pelvic
Yeah.
bone. Um, the shingles is all over that area.
Mm.
So the nerve pain from the discs unaligned or bulging or whatever the heck they were doing, like, I'm walking around in a chronic state of some type of shingles nerves
Mhm.
coming out on my back.
Yeah.
And how about that? Like, see, okay, duh. Like,
Yeah.
how did I not know that? Like, I'm just sitting here going, yeah, so I healed the pain, but there's some nerve dysfunction.
Mhm.
I gotta get to the bottom of it. Get
Yeah.
really curious. What's going on, body? All
What's
right.
going on? Because
What's going
the body's the messenger.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, that's going to be
Yeah.
so exciting. So
Yeah.
next week, remind me to tell everybody what's going on.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
maybe well, we'll talk about what we're going to do next week. I don't want to start throwing out ideas. We already got narcissists on the plate, on the
Yeah.
plate.
Yeah,
So,
maybe we want to bounce that one down, because that's really it's a negative. It's I really do. You and I both want to keep things
yeah,
in a positive, empowering, and
yeah,
yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
keep
So
going.
I just want to like put one last point in, which I didn't plan on, but that is let go of the need to compare yourself with others. Oh my gosh, talk about another trap for the perfectionist.
Mhm,
Because what lives underneath, I'll say it again, what lives underneath the perfectionist energy is the feeling of not enough or the
mhm,
feeling of wrong, right? That lives underneath that. Not good enough is really, you know, that what lives underneath that. So when you start comparing yourself with others, either way, whether you feel the better than or less than, whatever way it goes, it's not
mhm,
serving you. I'm better at them than that because that's gonna you'll flip onto the other side. It could be in the next 5 minutes. It could be in the next 5 days.
mhm,
So just recognize that everyone has their own unique journey here on the planet. They have their own unique talents, and some people are going to be more talented than you in some areas, and you're going to be more talented in some other areas. It doesn't really matter. It's just live out your talent and do and leave out the comparison because that can really get us wound up in some pretty um, negative energy, but also really unhealthy energy is that need to compare.
And that is something in my business that we've been preaching forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
Don't compare yourself to someone who's more successful, and I mean, everybody starts from zero and ends up wherever it is they end up, and they end up where they end up because they work their ass off,
Mhm.
and they've gone through all the same emotions that you're going to go through in order to succeed.
Right.
So in that comparison, and now I feel just kind of in the nature of social media, in, oh man, social media, unless you're using it, like, I am finally to a point with social media, and I went off social media completely for years. I mean, I still had my Facebook and LinkedIn, and I still had my accounts up, but I don't, and I still interact very, very infrequently, because it's a time consuming thing. And I'd rather be spending my time digging in with my family, like, doing
Right.
things that are fulfilling. But that need to compare, when you have, 18-inch waists, and
Mhm.
these, like, and now, CGI is a thing. They're
Oh, yeah.
actually all these people who want to become these influencers, faking it till you make it, doing all sorts of really stupid things, like going broke,
Mhm.
all while trying to fake like they're somebody that they're not. And then the people that are watching them, where they're getting their crowds and their followers from, are sitting there just wishing that they could be this person.
Right.
And I swear it was the Kardashians that started this whole really fake persona. And I only know that because I was living in LA when they came online, and I'm like, what in the actual hell is happening here? This
Mhm.
is not life, people. This is not. And and they, so desperately want to be somebody,
Mhm.
or, and again, it goes both ways. So I get excellent final bullet point, because I think that wraps up the whole piece
Mhm.
of perfection, is
Yeah.
comparing yourself to other people.
Right.
Everybody's the same. We
Mhm.
all have the same needs and wants, and ultimately it's just need to be, I think, heard and loved and nurtured, and that, I think, is the premise of humanity, is love.
Mhm.
So outside of that, we all have the
Yeah. At the core level, we definitely all have core needs that, as human beings, we need to be met. And then it branches off into individual, stuff that
right.
we're looking at. But yeah, we all have a need to belong and a need to be
Mhm.
loved. And, these are things that just are part of the human condition, but positive side of the human condition. And because so many people aren't getting those needs met, then they move into other places that aren't healthy. There's one
Mhm.
thing I just want to kind of like wind up, because it came to me as you were speaking, and this was
Mhm.
years ago, with my friend John, who does watch the podcast. So hello, John.
Hi,
Uh,
John.
yeah, from high school, and we've stayed connected over the years. Sometimes there was big blocks of time that were, we didn't, but we always kind of come back around. And one of the things that, gosh, it was probably 20, 23 or 24 years ago. Um, and I lived by, if you can't fix it, flaunt it.
Yes.
Yeah, that was kind of my mantra. For I haven't thought about that in about that many years, right? But that came to me just here in the last minute. If you can't fix it, flaunt it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's like the Dirty Dancing, uh, the beautiful lady with the nose. I
Oh yes,
can't think.
yes.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah,
Like, that's the imperfection.
yeah,
Beautiful,
yeah,
beautiful, perfect, imperfect. When you
yeah,
try to fix it,
yep.
it's not the same.
It's not the same. Yeah,
So if you can't fix it, flaunt it.
yep.
Love it.
Hmm.
Perfect. Well, Lisa, I think we covered it.
I think we did. I
Very
think we
good.
perfectly imperfectly covered it.
I know. So let's just, everybody have a fantastic week ahead, and we can't wait to tap in and check in with y'all next Wednesday.
Yeah, and hit that subscribe button.
Like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. All right. Over and out, Lisa.
Over now.